What if Tatsumaki was Deku's mother? Chapter 8. Class 1A all sat on the bus as they drove across the country to their summer training camp. Deku was dozing off at the back of the bus when someone jabbed him in the ribs, shocking him awake. "Who the hell?" asked Deku. Deku looked to his side and saw Ashito's pink face smiling at him. "I thought Kachan was sat next to me," asked Deku. "I asked to switch," said Ashito. "He didn't mind." Cool. What's up?" said Deku. Deku rubbed his eyes sleepily and yawned. "Well, we sat here for so long. I'm bored and I want to do something more fun," said Ashito. Ashito smirked, making Deku pull back confused. "Can you help me train?" asked Ashito. Deku let out a sigh. He was very confused for a moment. Ashito reached into a bag and pulled out a dumbbell. "It's only about 10 kilograms, so it isn't very useful to me anymore, but with your help it can be," said Ashito. "How much gravity do you want?" said Deku. "Well, I can handle 14G for short bursts with max power, so how about that?" asked Ashito. Have you seen how strong you are without your quirk?" asked Deku. Ashito stopped for a second. "No, I haven't. Let's see." For the rest of the journey, Deku and Ashito experimented and slowly increased the gravity on the dumbbells, finally stopping at about 5 times. When the bus stopped, everyone hopped off and Aizawa pointed into the distance. "The forest training camp is that way. It will probably take you about 3 hours to get there. We'll be packing away dinner in 2 hours. Hurry up," said Aizawa. The entire class was thrown off the cliff, but none of them smashed into the ground. They all looked up to see Deku floating over them, his eyes glowing. 2 hours, huh?" said Deku. Deku waved his hands and everyone floated lightly off the ground. I'll finish this in under a minute," said Deku. Deku took off at max speed, dragging his classmates along for the drive. Meanwhile, Aizawa looked down at them from the top of the cliff. "Predictable," said Aizawa. Aizawa activated his quirk, taking Deku's away. The green-haired boy, who was flying quite quickly, skidded to along the ground and crashed into a tree. Ashito ran over to him concerned, but laughed when she saw Deku annoyed and mud covering his face. "No cheating, Midoriya. You must all go through the entirety of the woods under your own power, and you must also arrive as a group," said Aizawa. Deku got to his feet, dusting himself off. "Could have told us that before I crashed into a tree," said Deku, annoyed. A few hours later, the students arrived. They were beaten and sore, but they had made it in time. "Should have let us fly," said Deku, panting. Aizawa walked over, almost looking proud. "You made it in time, so enjoy your dinner, then go wash up for bed. Sleep well, your training will begin in the morning," said Aizawa. The class began to disperse and Deku noticed a small boy standing off to the side looking annoyed. "Hi, I'm Izuku Midoriya from the Hero." Deku stopped talking when Koda swung his fist straight at Deku's balls. However, Deku's reflexes were quicker and he blocked the attack with a barrier. "That's a strong punch," said Deku. Koda stormed off, leaving Deku very confused. Ashito ran over and leaned on Deku's shoulder. "What was that about?" asked Ashito. "I don't have a clue," asked Deku. The next day, Deku and Ashito were paired together for their training. Aizawa had seen how much gravity training had helped Ashito and wanted to take advantage of that. Using her maximum of 1 for all, she was able to push 14G, but could only hold it for about a minute, so she spent most of her time at around 5. Ashito got to her feet after another quick break and looked up at Deku, who was holding a massive boulder above his head. "Okay, I'm ready. Hit me," said Ashito. Deku flicked his wrist and the force on Ashito's increased from 5 times to 14 times. The near 3 times increase forced Ashito down to one knee, but slowly she managed to force herself up. "See? Easy," said Ashito. Deku could see her legs straining, but respected her confidence. Ashito started doing some squats, but only managed to do 5 before she collapsed to the ground. Deku flicked his wrist again, dropping the energy back down. "You alright?" asked Deku. "Yeah, I'm alright, I'm getting there," said Ashito. "Do you want me to lower the force?" asked Deku. Ashito glared up at him. She was expecting a cocky smirk, but instead she saw genuine concern. Ashito gulped, blushing a little. Conveniently, she had pink skin, so Deku didn't notice her blush. No, I'm fine. I can feel I'm getting close to breaking through my limits. I just need to try harder, said Ashito. Pink sparks shot off around Ashito's body as she powered up again. Let's go again, said Ashito. The training was harsh and brutal. At the end of each day, Ashito was beyond exhausted, but she couldn't be happier. She was getting close to breaking through her limits and increasing her power. He may be cute, but I can't let him stay ahead of me forever. I'm supposed to surpass All Might. I can't let him down, said Ashito. Ashito clenched her fist and looked up at the sky. That will be the best, said Ashito. On a mountaintop overlooking the camp, Darby sat waiting. Next to him stood a slender woman with green hair. Why do you want this kid so bad? He doesn't seem like the villainous type, asked Darby. He's not going to join. He will just die by my hand, said Psychos. What did he do to annoy you? Asked Darby. Not him, his mother. I'll get my revenge against that bitch by killing her son, said Psychos. Later that day, Class 1A was told that they were going to be taking part in a test of courage. However, due to odd numbers, Deku was left out. He didn't mind though, and flew up to the mountain, landing next to Kota. Go away, said Kota. I brought you some food, said Deku. Fine, you can stay, said Kota. Deku sat down and eventually the two started talking. Kota told Deku about his parents and Deku told Kota about his. The little boy was shocked to find out he was All Might's kid. Do you want some more food? Asked Deku. Kota looked down at the empty bowl and nodded. Want to fly down with me? Asked Deku. Yes please, said Kota. Deku flicked his wrist and wrapped Kota in his green energy, then took off. Or at least, he tried. For some reason, Deku's powers weren't working. The green light surrounding Kota's body faded and went out. Then seconds later, Deku fell down to one knee. What's going on? Asked Deku. Deku held his head in pain as he focused. This is suppression. Only powerful psychic users have ever been able to use this ability, said Deku. Kota bent down, putting his hand on Deku's shoulder. What's wrong? Asked Kota. Kota, get out of here. Find Mr. Aizawa. Tell him there's an Esper and they're stronger than me, said Deku. Whose energy is this? It's not Mum or Auntie Fubuki. It's darker, thought Deku. Deku held his head as Kota sprinted off. However, the small boy only got a few meters before he was cut off by the massive hulking body of Muscular. Where are you going, brat? Asked Muscular. Muscular punched forward, trying to crush the little boy, but Deku jumped in the way, taking a massive punch to the back. Deku smashed into the ground, coughing up blood. Is he dead already? Asked Muscular. The hulking man reached down and picked Deku up by his neck. He coughed up some blood, making the hulking villain smirk. Still got some life in ya, huh? I thought you would be stronger. Yo, Psychos, are you sure this is the right kid? Asked Muscular. Don't underestimate him. If I wasn't here, you'd be fighting for your life against this brat, said Psychos. Muscular pulled Deku close to his face, inspecting him. Whilst this was happening, Deku glanced up, seeing a woman glaring down at him from the top of the mountain. Her hair glowing green and flowing like it was underwater. I need to break out of her suppression, thought Deku. Deku thought back to his training with his mother. Esper-type quirks are rare, and it's even rarer for them to be powerful. Usually it's just low-level telekinesis. Only about 1 in every 1,000 Espers have the potential to be as strong as us. That is why I created a technique called suppression, said Tornado. Tornado powered up and Deku fell to the ground. Using intense focus, I can cut off your ability to access your powers. However, this still takes a lot of energy and focus, and it isn't 100%. They were able to use about 1% of their power, so stay on guard. Even the smallest distraction, and they will be free, said Tornado. I need to break her focus, thought Deku. Deku launched his fist forward, but it was caught by Muscular. The massive villain laughed at the pathetic attack, but it was just a distraction. His other hand was behind his back and picked up a small rock from the ground using his powers. He didn't have enough strength to make it denser, but it should be enough. With a flick of his wrist, it shot up, smashing into Psycho's forehead. Her eyes snapped shut and she clutched her head in pain. "That damn brat! I'll tear his head off," said Psychos. She ran over to the edge and saw Deku floating in front of Muscular. The arm that had been gripping Deku's neck was twisted and broken, but the massive villain didn't give up. "You've made a fatal mistake today," growled Deku. Deku reached out, grabbing Muscular around the neck with his power, then shot up the mountain. The massive villain was dragged along for the ride and was smashed into the cliff face over and over again as they climbed. Eventually they reached the summit, and Deku threw Muscular to the ground in front of Psychos. "Leave before I take you apart," growled Deku. "Don't get cocky, kid. You said yourself that I'm stronger," said Psychos. "Yeah, I thought that, because the only person I've ever known to be able to use suppression is my mother. I assumed that you'd have to be stronger than me, than the target, but after feeling your power a bit, I'm not so sure. You're strong, but I don't think it will be enough," said Deku. Deku powered up, dark green energy wrapping around him. Psycho sneered at him, powering herself up. The ground around the two splintered and cracked with the power being displayed. Deku's hand shot out, grabbing Psycho's ankle and pulling her to the ground before grabbing a nearby boulder and launching at her. Psychos rolled to the side, barely dodging it, then shot to her feet. She reached out, grabbing the same rock, pulling it apart in the air, then crushing the remains into hyper-dense micro projectiles. With a flick of her wrist, Psychos launched her barrage, aiming to shred Deku to ribbons. Using all of his power, Deku put up a massive shield in front of him, as strong as possible. He couldn't allow a single one of those rocks to make it through, otherwise he will die. "So, after I kill you, I'm going to send your heart to your mother," growled Psychos. "You must be suicidal. She'd tear you apart," growled Deku back. Deku gritted his teeth as the rocks pounded against his shield. They were insanely fast and Deku was slowly losing power. Suddenly a crack formed in the barrier. It was small, but it made Deku's heart jump into his throat. His eyes glowed with power as he pushed out as much as he could to keep the barrier up. Psychos was shredding the mountaintop with her power and was sending the rocks at Deku like a Gatling gun. "I'll finally get that bitch back for what she did to me," growled Psychos. She couldn't take the rocks directly underneath him thanks to his aura, but that didn't extend to the rocks behind him. Psycho reached forward, shredding the ground behind Deku and shooting it towards him. Deku dropped to his knee, wrapping his shield around him. He was now taking extreme punishment on two fronts, and the crack in his barrier was still growing. "She had near infinite ammo thanks to this mountain. What can I do?" asked Deku. A smirk formed on Deku's face as a plan started to form, but it quickly faded when a single rock broke through his barrier, slicing across his cheek. Deku roared in pain as blood poured down his face, but he kept his focus. With one hand, he kept his barrier up, while with the other he reached down, picking up the rock that just cut him. Focusing about 80% of his power onto the barrier, Deku wrapped the rock in the remaining 20. It shot high into the sky, and Deku forced himself to his feet. Slowly he began pushing forward, rock smashing into the barrier as Psychos desperately pushed him back. Deku kept pushing, his eyes closed as he focused on the still climbing rock. "Okay, it's ready," said Deku. Deku shoved his barrier forward, then rolled to the side. Without his power, the barrier was quickly shredded. Then Psychos turned her attention to Deku. Hundreds of bullet-like rocks shot towards him, each strong enough to punch through a tank. Deku flicked his wrist and his eyes glowed with power. The rock that had been rising to the sky stopped, then shot back down to earth. Using 100% of his power, Deku increased the gravity on the rock, all the way up to 50 times. Deku quickly jumped backwards, dodging Psycho's attack. "I bet Tornado will be disappointed. You are so weak compared to you. I'll kill..." She was cut off when a hypersonic rock shot from the sky and smashed through her outstretched arm. Psychos fell to the ground screaming as she stared down at her severed arm. Deku flew over, landing in front of her. "I said I'd take you apart," said Deku. At this moment, Muscular woke up. He'd been knocked out by Deku smashing him against the mountain, but Psycho's shrill screams woke him up. "He's not so weak after all," said Muscular. Deku noted this and shot over to the massive villain. He couldn't let him escape. "I'll kill you, brat," growled the villain. Muscular's non-broken arm smashed into Deku's barrier, but couldn't manage to break it. "I don't think you can. Now sit down," growled Deku. Deku flicked his wrist and Muscular's face smashed into the ground. The villain roared in rage, but couldn't pull himself out free. "You're just annoying," said Deku. Deku grabbed Muscular by the ankle and threw him into the air. He then turned, walking back to Psychos. Just before he got there, he flicked his wrist down and Muscular slammed back into the ground, knocking him out. Psychos was holding her arm, silently screaming, when she saw Deku step in front of her. "You're coming with me. You'll explain why you're here and who you are," said Deku. Deku held out his hands and Psychos felt her powers vanish. "Impossible. She taught it to you too?" asked Psychos. Deku froze for a second. He didn't lose focus, but that definitely confused him. "My mum trained you?" asked Deku. "Did she really not tell you about me?" asked Psychos. Deku shook his head, slowly getting annoyed. "That makes sense. It's not usual to tell your children about your exes," said Psychos. That statement surprised Deku, making him lose focus for a split second. However, that was all she needed. With a flick of her wrist, Psychos launched Deku back, then flew out into the woods. Deku flew after her at max speed, quickly catching up to her and smashing her into a tree. Psychos picked herself up, but found she didn't have any power again. She turned, seeing Deku floating over her. "Answers. Now," growled Deku. "I was your mother's girlfriend for 3 years, until that bastard All Might came back. Overnight she changed, and afterwards the only thing she was interested in was him. It was like I didn't exist. I hated it, but I couldn't do anything until they split up several years later. Their relationship wasn't public, so I only heard about them splitting up about a year later. I went to her explaining that I still cared for her, but she didn't feel the same. I'm sorry, I'm not interested in romantic relationships anymore, at least not for a while. Anyway, I'm too busy with this little guy," said Tornado. Tornado picked up a baby Deku, who cooed adorably. "Is that All Might's kid?" asked Psychos. "It is," said Tornado. "First you leave without a word for without a word for All Might, and then I found out he knocked you up. Why can't you just love me?" growled Psychos. Tornado's expression hardened. "I'm sorry about how we ended, but you will not shout at me. Not in my home," growled Tornado. Psycho's hair spiked up. "We can fix it. This brat is the only thing in the way." Tornado took a step forward, anger dripping off her. "Izuku is not a brat. Now apologize," said Tornado. Psycho's body glowed green as she grabbed Deku, trying to throw him away, but she didn't succeed. Tornado shot forward, grabbing Psychos by the throat and slamming her through a wall. "You will not touch him!" screamed Tornado. Tornado's normal green energy was quickly darkening into black as she squeezed her former lover's throat. She was ready to kill her when Deku began to cry in her other arm. Snapping out of her bloodlust, Tornado threw Psychos to the floor. "Get out!" screamed Tornado. Not needing to be told twice, she ran away, crying as Tornado began calming Deku. "It's all your fault," said Psychos. Deku looked down at the wounded villain with a mixture of disappointment and disgust. "You're insane," said Deku. "Maybe, but I'll still kill you," said Psychos. Psychos reached into a pocket without Deku noticing and pulled out a syringe, stabbing it into her neck. Deku shot down, yanking it out, but it was already empty. "What was it?" asked Deku. Psychos smirked as her aura exploded out of her. "A quirk enhancer," growled Psychos. Deku's eyes went wide, but his surprise was short-lived when Psychos grabbed his arm, breaking it, then flicked him with all of his might, like it was nothing, through the forest. She's so strong. Even at full power, she broke my arm with her powers like it was paper, said Deku. Deku looked up, seeing Psychos jetting towards him, blasting through trees. I've got to slow her down, said Deku. Deku slammed his hands together and 40 trees smashed into Psychos. Pathetic, growled the villain. In an explosion of wooden splinters, Psycho stepped out of the pile of trees, wrapped in her dark green aura. She glanced over at Deku, who was groaning in pain. A 2-foot spear of wood was stabbing through his shoulder, pinning him to a tree. Across the forest, Ashito felt her stomach sink. She spin-kicked Moonfish into a tree, then span around looking into the distance. Deku? Asked Ashito. Powering up to maximum, she sprinted off. She didn't know what she was feeling, but she was definitely worried about Deku. Meanwhile, Psychos walked up to Deku, who was unconscious due to blood loss. Psychos put her finger in her ear and activated a communication device. I've got him, said Psychos. A black portal opened behind her. She grabbed Deku by the throat, throwing him through it. Give him back, yelled Ashito. Ashito jumped at Psychos, but she was flicked away. When Ashito got her bearings again, the portal was gone, and she was alone. End of Chapter 8.